Let's get started. So this IAM lesson, I'll be using my regular account. So this IAM, it's the service that you will use daily basis, but you cannot practice that with AWS Academy account. You can't practice that because of limitations. So what will happen is, for example, with this IAM, as you already know, you can create the user, and that user has all power access, admin access. In that case, like there is no limit. So basically, you can create an admin user that has no limitations. But AWS Academy is supposed to have some limitations to limit this cost. It's like someone is paid by AWS, so they want to restrict some access. So for example, they don't want you to run some huge servers. Instead, they just ask you to, like, you can create smaller services that you can say here, not region service. So basically, if you had that role, like if you had the permission to create IAM user, then you can simply create some power user in here, and then like all these restrictions are ignored, right? You overrode all those restrictions. So that's the reason why we can't practice this. So I will demonstrate today's lesson in here. So let's get started. Yesterday, the last task. So it's something that I demoed today. So don't worry about. So what you are supposed to do is something I mentioned. So if you look at this dashboard, I enabled MFA for my root user. So I think everyone followed this part. And I explained why you need to use this IAM user instead. So I have one user here. And then this is IAM user and this add, and you can give yourself an account alias. So currently you have these numbers. It's hard to memorize these numbers, so you can give it an alias name, like maybe your name. And then you can use that for your convenience. So let's create a user. Let's create a user. Here, this user, I'm just giving maybe students to access this AWS account. So in that case, it's a student name. So for example, you can call it Dana, like student name. And then, so this user, there are two things. So it can be, this user can be a user assigned to a real person. If it's a real person, then a real person knows like how to use this AWS Management Console. But you can also define rules for your application. For example, if your application needs permission to read files from S3, in that case, you can define like S3 user. And then in this case, this S3 user will be used by your application. So you only need this programmatic access. You don't need management access for this. So that's like two different aspects. Make sense? And now in this case, I'll just create a regular user student. Only this way, I'm not sure it allows typing. Anyway, so this user will have programmatic access and console access. So I can give some password here, and there's something I entered here, so I don't need to reset that after successful login. Okay, next. So it allows that. Insert it. So now, so this user, you can simply add this user to a group, and then this user will get all policies associated with this groups. So for example, if you have at 100 developers, in that case, instead of giving cross to every single instead of giving those 100 students these policies one by one, but you can define those policies in one group, and then you assign that user to the group, and then it would inherit all those permissions. Are you following that? Good. So in my case, maybe let's create one group. So I'm going to create a group called student, and the student group will have access to S3 series. So I have S3, and I'll use the policies with this AWS account. So it's a policy managed by AWS. So you don't touch this, like it's managed and updated by AWS. So I am using this AWS managed policy. You can also create this customer managed policy. So in that case, you will define policy yourself. In real life, this customer managed policy is always used. The AWS managed policy is good for testing purpose, but it's not for real life. So anyway, I'll select this one. That's it, basically. Give it a name, and give permissions like users in this group, what users in this group can do. So in this case, it can do anything with S3. So I created group in here, and now go back. So this is student obvious, so I just keep it in here. Permissions. And if I refresh this, student group will show up in here. I'll just add this group and review, and create user. And next time when I create the user, I don't need to assign policies. Instead, I just simply add to the group. And also one thing, and now I wanna add my students like one more permission. Like, for example, add permission, touch policy. Let's say EC2 full access. And now you can add this to the group. Now, if you have hundreds of users in this group, then they will all receive this permission at the same time. Without group, you have to assign them one by one. And since we selected that programmatic access, so this user can access AWS using CLI and SDK. In the SDK, you can also define this. So I'll grab this access key. So I would need this. And then I also need this secret key. I have this. It's like username and password. The user is created, and let's use this URL. So I have two users now. Okay, let's test this out. Let's go to another browser and sign into console. I am user. So first it asks account ID. So you can put your, or I can put my alias. And here we just created this user, and password is. Oh, now I got access to this account. And if I go to services like IAM, then also through S3. If I go to here, it's denied because we only have access to S3 and EC2. So on this S3, we should be able to see like create some bucket. So let me create one bucket. This bucket CS5. Cool. So yeah, we see that now it can read it and it can create this. Anyway, so that's first part. Now what so let's take a look at the policy. So as I mentioned, this is not recommended. So let's write our own policy. Let's write our own policy. So create inline policy. So here you can you define the service that you want to access. So I want to give this user S3 access, but instead of full, I want to specify the actions. You always have to follow the least privilege principle. So here, actions. Maybe let's scroll this. I might need get object, and maybe in this list bucket, so it will list those buckets. And what else do we have? Okay, and then if you want to write, then you can put object. So something like this. So that should be it. List bucket. That is how you do it. And this list bucket, for example, now this list bucket action expects bucket. So it looks like this objects inside this bucket. So you have to be like more specific. The best practice is it has to be specific. Like you have to put the bucket name in here. So any is like not recommended in most cases because it's not following the principle. I think I just created one bucket. So let's put that in here. List group this and bucket name. So this is for the list bucket action. And this get object, put object, they expect object. So some actions they operate at this bucket level and some operations they operate at object level. So it depends. In this case, what I would do is bucket name here. I would say this can add any bucket. So in this case, any is fine because we already specified the bucket in here. But now we have like more specific policies. S3 actions on this resource. And these are the required. And there is service action resource. These are the things required when you are defining policy. And there is one thing optional, but it's important and it's used a lot in real life. So what I could do is I can add condition, and then when this condition is met, the user can do these actions. So right now, if I create this inline policy, then this user can do those actions. You can see the button. But now, instead of all the users, I just want this user called, this the user. And in this user, what we can do is we can give this user a tag. So in the tag, let's say team, let's say DevOps. So now I want to add one more condition that users can do only that user is in DevOps department. That's what condition is. Following. If I create another user that doesn't have any tag like team, or if that user is belonging to different team, then this will not take effect. Makes sense?
A group in the group.
Mm.
It's making a group inside another group, something like that.
No, so this is inline policy that we are attaching to the group, right? And now all the users in that group has this permission. But then we are adding some condition in here. They all have this permission, but here, like only when this condition is met. So for example, here add condition and principal tag. There's principal tag so here. So principal is the one who's using this policy. In our case, principal is the user. The user is calling. That's exactly because that's exactly what we want. Because this principal, this user has this DevOps name. So to capture this tag, you select this principal, and tag key is team, and then qualifier is default, and operator is string equals, and then value is DevOps. Okay, those are like these three are required. So there's conditions. I think you have seen like how powerful it is. It's powerful and you can do a lot of things with this. So and then in real life we don't do anything manually here. We just write templates, and this is how the policy looks like. While we are doing in here, it generated this automatically. So put object, get object, list bucket on this bucket on this object, and there's a condition in here. The string equals this team tag should have DevOps. So follow this policy. Everyone is following, right? Okay, I'll review this and S3 access to test bucket. Create this. Let's go this by. Let me create. Okay. So let me create one more bucket. This is the admin. So we do have one password. Test bucket. I would say confidential buckets. Is only admin users can see, but the regular users like student, they cannot see this. They shouldn't see this. And I'll put some object in here. Just this file in here. Let's go back here. About one more. Okay, so now there are some files and there are two buckets. So let me remove these two policies and let's test our policy. So we should be able to see objects in this bucket, but the other one should reject. And also what I can do is maybe I can create one more use. Okay, that I can test it later. So let's just, anyway, let's check this. So we don't have permission here. Refresh. So this is the IAM user that we created. And currently this user has only one policy. Okay, I think that makes sense. Okay, this user doesn't have any permission to list buckets. It can see objects in that bucket, but it cannot list those buckets. So what can I do? That I can. So that I will do with the CL icon. So I can I can simply add that action, but I will do now like something different. Let's use these tokens. I'm gonna use AWS CLI install, and then you download it and you can install it. Once you do that, it will create one folder in here, AWS. So in your root folder, they create that when you install that package, it creates this folder, .aws. And inside here, you will see credentials. And this is where these tokens live. So open this up in here. Yeah. Let me replace that this way. So this is the one. I replace it and my default. Okay, I saved this. Now, if I write AWS S3 ALS, something like this, it would grab a token from this, and this token is currently associated with that IAM user. AWS S3 and ALS bucket name is this bucket objects S3 CLI. This subject AWS S3 is this is here. AWS and this is S3 API. So let me S3 API and AWS S3 API, and the operation is list objects. List objects, and now this command expects one parameter, which is bucket name, and the other parameters in this square brackets are optional. So it looks like I have to do objects and bucket, and the bucket name is do you see here? Key name is Cloud Company. This is the file that I uploaded. Makes sense? And now let's test the condition. Let's test the condition. Now go back to the. Yes, we can. But I forgot the syntax. Which one is my main? Here, here. Let's go back to here. We have only one policy. Or maybe let's go back to the user. So this user currently in DevOps team, and now let's then change the team from DevOps team to architect. Save changes. Now, if it may need like 20 to 30 seconds. Let's see. And then we should see rejection because of that condition. Okay, cool. So that's basically what IAM is. I think you now got some understanding. In IAM, now let's go back to the slide. In IAM, there are two types of policies, like identity access management. So first one is identity-based policies. That's something that we just did. It's a policy that's associated with a user or a role. Role is, I will talk about this. Yeah, now let's talk about role. So role is, now it's not person to AWS. It's AWS service communicating with other service. You cannot, you don't directly access those bodies to the service. Instead, you associate, basically what you do is, let's go back here. And now it's like, first part is done, identity based, and then that its principal is user. And now identity based policy continuation, but with roles. Yeah, this roles. So we talked about users, user groups. We talked about policies. There are two types of policies, and now let's see this. This role is something that we associate to the service. So for example, here it's asking who is the trusted entity. So basically, who will be using this role to access, to do the actions you defined earlier. So in this case, the common services is EC2 Lambda. Basically, in that case, we can do something like EC2. EC2 instance will use this role. I assume this role. And now it's asking like what that EC2 instance can do. So we can do S3 full access, similar thing. So role user is different because one you assign to a person, the other one you assign to a service, but they both have the same permissions. It's AWS managed permission and custom. So this is something they have in common.
We also can make customers.
Yes, of course, yeah. I select this, and then maybe we already have the customized one. But what's the name? It's something like test. Yeah, my test policy that show up in here. We can give it to you. So yeah, we can give it to here. Doesn't matter. And then that's basically that's it. And my EC2 role. And we do have this permission set. Let me create this. Is it great role? And now, if you associate this role with an EC2 instance, then EC2 can do operations that you defined in here. It will look like group. Like in user group, you see a similar thing, right? Associate permission. So it's the same thing here. So permission policy, it's same. But then rows have one more thing called trust relationship. So here you write like which service can use this row. And now, yeah, let's go to EC2. And now basically we can associate an instance with this IAM role. We cannot associate this role with Lambda, for example, because we didn't define it in here. We can define Lambda in here. Instead of a string, we can provide this type of string and then provide EC2 and Lambda. In that case, Lambda, EC2 both can do actions defined in this permission policy. So instances launch here, and this process you are already familiar with. So here, and then scroll all the way down, advanced, and in this IAM instance profile, that should show up. My EC2 role or profile is the same. So now this EC2 can do actions that define it in here. And now you might be wondering, you can simply define, you can give these policies, these tokens, you can give these tokens to EC2 instance, right? So EC2 instance can use this permanent token. So basically the question is like, what's the difference between these two approaches? You can, in this EC2, you can give IAM role, or in your EC2, you can give these static permanent tokens, right? So those are the questions. So giving permanent token it's not a best practice. So first thing, because if you lose this, then like if you lose this token, so for example, luckily like right now it's only specific to that one bucket. But if you have like some power policies like administrative policy, in that case, if you lose this permanent token, then you would lose all the access. Like they can do whatever they want. So the advantage of using this role in here, using role instead of permanent token is when you use role, AWS automatically rotates the token. Like every 15 minutes or every 1 hour, it would rotate the token automatically. And that will look like something like, okay, for that. So currently what we have is, so we can have our application on EC2 instance, and then that's accessing S3. And here, let's say that we have permanent tokens. We can do this, no issues, it still works. But when you have IAM, that's prepared because it's temporary token. In that case, what happens is that you have EC2, and it makes some implicit call first. It makes implicit call to something called AWS simple token service. And then this simple token service returns, instead of permanent token, it returns a temporary token. And then it goes back to the, so this is the first one. It would make call to simple token service. So this is a service generates temporary tokens instead of permanent. And then secondly, you receive the temporary token. And then it's the normal process. Access to S3. It's the third. So this part is implicit. The advantages again is temporary token. So now I will show you this right now, how it looks like. If you go to this Academy account, AWS details, click on this. So right now it's green. And click on this. You can access to this AWS account, Academy account using CLI. That's possible. What you need is tokens, right? Show this and copy this guy and paste that in here. And then I would say using, I'm just creating different. So here, access key, secret key, but somehow here there is something called session token, right? So this session token is what makes it temporary. And now there's all the actions in red. It's done by AWS, and they automatically rotates this token. Someone takes over your token and takes over your server, and then maybe compromises this token, let's say. Since you are using IAM role, that token is only available for, let's say, like up to 12 hours. And then that user cannot use that token. So something like that. So then the recommended way is always use IAM role instead of is hard-coded permanent tokens on EC2. Okay, that's here. Okay, that's the end of this identity-based policy. So identity-based policies, you're using user, group, or role to do something. There is another way that you can define policies on resource itself. So for example, let's see here. EC2 and Lambda, that we can add IAM role, no issues. But there are some services that you cannot associate that with IAM role. In that case, what you do is define this resource-based policy. It's something you already did. For example, yesterday, what you did is, it's the user, like everyone, it's the internet. The internet can access to S3 bucket. We cannot give this internet IAM role or IAM user, like we cannot give that, right? So because of that reason, on S3, we defined resource-based policy. It's like the same policy, policy that we defined here, like action. It's just first thing is allow or deny. Allow or deny. And then actions. Actions is those get object. I can maybe like in resource-based, it's similar to permission policy. So you have effect. In this way, that's fine. You have effect, you have action, you have resource, condition, and in principal tag, you also have in this resource policy, you have that principal tag, like plus principal tag. That means that who can do it. In our case, it was this stuff. And similarly, like this is what we did yesterday. This is like when this resource-based policy comes into the picture. In the coming lab, we will be doing something like this. S3, when we put an object to S3, an event is triggered, and then we want to trigger simple notification service, and it will send email to you. Okay. You cannot associate this SNS or S3 with IAM. It's not possible. But still, it's two different zeros, so you have to write IAM somehow. So how you do that is you write the IAM on this side, like the one that's accessed. So SNS needs to allow that access. So allow access from S3 on this resource and so on. So okay, so yeah. And now there could be like some overlap. So for example, the IAM profile, you define it that it can access to S3 bucket, right? Full access. But on the S3, you deny that access. And on the S3 resource-based policy, you deny that. No one can access to it, right? So now there is overlap, and you might be wondering which one wins. So the answer is in here. So first thing is, you just need to, like, there are more, but you just need to know two things in here. Right? So first thing AWS evaluate is, if it sees deny, then that takes effect. If there is deny and allow, then deny takes precedence. And also, if there are like deny and allow, and it's the same thing, but a resource-based policies take precedence over identity-based policies. So that's just 2 key points here if there's overlap. And that's pretty much all for this lesson. Now let's double check. So condition, we talked about that. Here, a sample policy. Can you read this policy? Take 30 seconds to see what it meant. Yes.
If in resource based part, if we put it in ID, no, in a resource part, if we put it as a load. It's because it says the night falls always.
So I would say it's, yeah, so decision is here with deny, with all policies, and is there. So I think this deny will take effect. So it like follows this chart. So I would say deny will take effect. Okay, so here what this policy is saying is, so describe database instance, database cluster, and global cluster. Like everyone can see databases you created in your account. When we do that S3 here, this user cannot, like here we do have some buckets, but we can't see it because this doesn't have permission to see that. In this case, it's similar. Anyone can see all database instances in this account. That's what it's saying. And then there's next action is anyone can reboot the stop instance, but then there is a condition in here. So basically, if we phrase this in English, it's saying like DB admins can start, stop, reboot instances, and all users can see what we have in database listed reserves. It's just an example. IAM role we discussed, so IAM role similar to IAM user, but you assign that to a resource or a service. And the process that, so this process is, the process in red, it's known as assume role. Assume role means this service is making implicit call to AWS SDS and retrieving this temporary token. When service can assume or use that IAM role, and an IAM user role have one thing in common, so that's permission policy. And when the service in the trust policy assumes the role, AWS security token service returns temporary tokens, and that we have seen. And in IAM role, we have this trust relationship that says like who can use this. And when you create an account, you will see this role, like AWS service role for support. So that means AWS support can do actions you define it in this permission. Because you faced some issue and they at least need some permission to read your resource so they can help you. That policy is like all the roles has this trust relationship or trust policy. And in the resource-based policy, we also have that trust attribute. Where in IAM user, like trust policy is already the user. We already know that. So basically, we can state in this way. Like in condition, in IAM, there are 1, 2, 3. There are 4 things, like 4 required and 1 optional. So it doesn't matter if it's identity-based or resource-based or it's IAM user or it's just answers. The first thing is it's effect, it's allow or deny. The second is what actions. The third thing is on which resource. You don't want byte calcium. And then fourth thing is like who can do the executions. And then fifth, yet important is condition. It's hobby. So this is basically the summary of this test. When you do this, you access the and this is so it generates temporary token. It says key ID and secret key is like a password, and session token is temporary token, and this can be 12 hours, and or it can be 15 minutes. And the ephemeral is the underlying service. So for example, EC2 makes implicit call to this ephemeral. So this is like this red line. The first number one is like make calling ephemeral endpoint on this service. And then, well, on behalf of the resource and fetch temporary tokens. And then it all happens under the hood. For instance, when fetching images from S3 in EC2, EC2 makes assume call to SDS and receives the token, provides the token to S3. And you don't have to manually update those temporary tokens, it's done by AWS. And this is some differences between IAM user and role. So IAM user, you assign that to a person, the other one is to a service. And these tokens are permanent, so it could be risky. But like this happens a lot. Students practice AWS in their application, and then they put this permanent key in their, because like you have to provide these tokens to access AWS. So they put this in the code, like in the environment file, and they push that code to GitHub. And now, yeah, it's like from last block, and that student lost like 300, 400 bucks because someone did something with that token. So that's the disadvantage of this permanent tokens, and that's when this AWS SDS comes into the picture. So it all applications and tokens are temporary. One last thing. When you access to AWS in real life, what you do is, like big organizations, you use your Microsoft permission to log into AWS. That's known as federated user. And it's similar to what we do with AWS Academic account. In AWS Academic account, we are not using any IAM users. Instead, we are using this system. Like we have access to this website, the instructor website, and then we can access to AWS. Under the hood, what it's using is so this thing is happening like this. So first, it's making call to that identity broker. It could be Microsoft, or it could be that website that we have seen, instructor website. And then that username password is validated on that corporate identity store. And then if it's successful, then you receive token from SDS. And then using that token, you can access to this AWS. So that's what identity federation and federated use. And this is used in real life, and even you are using it right now here. Let's talk. Any questions?
What's the thing? Yeah, it's the last one.
Which one?
Yeah. Just.
Yeah. today was a big day, so I don't normally have a class in the afternoon, but yeah, like this is an exception. So because of that reason, like I'm not publishing any homework today. You can just work on your previous.
You upload today's guide.
I think I already did it. Or didn't I?
No, there is.
It is, okay, I'll do that right now.
Thank you for calling.
Yes, they are. Okay, let's meditate and let's do order today. Make sure you complete your assignment 1 today. So tomorrow I will check what you did the last 2 days. Yeah,
Can you share the slides for me?
yeah, I just did.